Hello everybody and welcome to this class on putting makeup on a picture in Photoshop. Now as you can see here I've got my picture in my model and I'm going to zoom in just to show you kind of what we're going to do here. Now you can't always tell stuff when you're far out, so when you get really close, this is a really high resolution image which is great to play with. And I have to apologize, my neighbors seem to be doing some sort of construction next door, but there's not much I can do about that. Okay, so let's look really close here. One of the things that a lot of tutorials get wrong about makeup, and I'm not a makeup expert in any way, but they kind of overdo it and they don't make it look natural. So what I want to do real quick is walk you through exactly what I want to do, what I do to make a picture look like the makeup is actually real and applied, and even not totally perfect. Sometimes when you do things that look totally perfect in Photoshop, it makes it look kind of fake. So I want to start all over. I've got my layers over here, and I'm going to grab all those layers, and I'm going to group them together, and I'm going to get rid of them. There we go. All right, here we have our model back to ground zero. Now, the first thing I think we should do is just look at this picture for a second. We have a person who is probably a model, so they have good bone structure and everything. But once you get really up and close to anybody's skin, you start seeing a lot of blemishes. And so whenever I watch people do tutorials on how to actually do real makeup, the first thing that they do is to put a base on. So and the whole point of putting a base on, as far as I understand, is just to clear out the skin and make it smooth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on one half of the face so you can get an idea. There's no point in doing both sides because it's just going to be the same thing. So I'm going to start by creating over here. I'm just going to drag this down, and I like to make sure I've got a lot of copies of my original image. So what I'm going to do, excuse me, is just go, there's about 3 different ways to clear up her skin and get rid of these blemishes. The first one over here is, what we used to do is we used to have to use the clone tool. So we would do the clone tool and we'd make it small. I'm just using curly brackets left for this. And we would select an area and we would draw on it. And that's good as long as the area you're changing is exactly like the area you want to cover. Okay? Now, one thing I didn't do is I want to make sure that I'm working on a layer above my picture. So every time that I do this, I want to make sure at the top it says current and below. But the tool that they came out with a couple years ago, actually about 10 years ago, it was the healing brush. And there's a bunch of options on the healing brush. The one that I use most is just the normal healing brush. So if I click on Alt, I get this little I guess it's like a little bullseye, and you can select where you want to cover. So I click Alt, then I click where I want to heal. So I'm going to click up here and click here. And the nice thing about the heal brush is it doesn't have to be exactly like the area that you're covering. It will take the smoothness of where you're picking from, and then it'll blend it with the colors, the tone of where you're putting it. So I'm just clicking Alt and clicking Alt. And I'm going to go around and do this a little bit, just so we can have something to work with. And this is probably the best way to do this, to just kind of clean up an image. There we go. There we go. Okay. Now since this is a class on makeup, I don't want to spend too much time doing this because this really isn't what I would consider putting makeup on somebody. This is more of a just a retouching tool. So let's just kind of wrap this up. I can get this little freckle, get some of her lip here. But when you're doing makeup, one of the things that's really nice is it's actually so much easier to do this than it is to do actual makeup, because you can sit there and use the actual skin and the actual colors and things when you're doing these things. Okay, so that's pretty good. Another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here, and one of the things people do a lot of times is try to cover up the bags under their eyes. Now she's got some lines here that we're going to work with. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another layer, and this time I'm going to go with the stamp tool. Now this is just something I do. I haven't really seen many people who do this, but I'm just going, this is not going to look realistic. I'm going to tone this down. I'm going to, you know, lower the opacity on this after I do it. But I'm going to click down here with the Alt key, and I'm just going to start covering up these lines. And I'm not too worried about if it looks realistic or not, because I'm going to take all this down. And this actually looks more realistic than sometimes when I do this. Okay. There we go. And so now I can take this layer and just bring it down a little bit and just make it so that those lines under her eyes just aren't so pronounced. Okay, there we go. All right, now what I want to start doing is working on the eyes. So let's go ahead and get really close in on the eyes. This is a very high resolution image, so we're really lucky. I'm going to create a new layer, and all I really want to do is to darken this area, you know, like you're doing an eye pin, whatever you call it, the pin that you use to darken your eye. And I'm just going to do this with a black brush, and it's going to look terrible for right now, but we're, like everything, we're just going to slowly tone it down. So we're going to start with a black brush. I have it right now at 20. I could even put this at 100 right now because it doesn't matter. We're going to tone it down. So we're just going to go around like this and like this. Go around twice just to make sure. Okay, now let's bring that down a little bit. And of course that looks terrible. We're going to blur that, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Okay, there we go. And now I'm going to create, on all of these, we're kind of going to do the same thing. We're going to create the colors, then we're going to create a layer mask. So I'm going to create a layer mask, and I'm going to make my black curly brackets right. I'm going to turn this down, the flow down here, and I'm just going to take some of that out. I'm not going to have anything there. I'm going to get really in there, and let me just kind of clear some of this out of the middle. There we go. Actually, we're getting rid of a little too much there. Let's bring that back up. Let's just kind of take some of this out. There we go. There we go. And as we go further through this, we're going to make it look a little better. It's not quite right there. But the whole key to this is subtlety, you know? So you can bring this down again to say 80. Okay. Now, the next thing I usually do is I start working on this fold in the eye. So I'm just going to go black again. So I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to draw in this on this part of the eye. And the flow is on 23. That's why you see it not really filling up, but I'm just going to fill this in. I don't have my tablet with me today. So we're going to fill this guy in. There we go. And we can fill in some of the bottom here too. Give her kind of smoky eyes. There we are. Okay, now we're going to bring that down again. Again, we're going to go to the layer mask, and I'm going to make my brush bigger again, and I'm going to just start kind of taking off some of this. There we go. Okay, now if you can go back and look at it, and we can see that our eye is looking a little more dark, kind of getting there. Now I'm going to do the final little layer here, which is going to be the color. Now I know everybody has different styles, and they like to wear makeup in different ways, so to each his own. I'm just going to add a color here. It doesn't really matter what color you put it. Just put something that you can see. So I'm going to put something really gaudy and tacky. Well, not turquoise, but I'm going to do blue. And I'm just going to put that here. And this is on the layer below these other layers. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but I'm just going to click this around this area. And I'm doing this with a big brush because I love this fade. And you can actually bring this down a little bit. And as you can see, it's on top of the eye, and it's not, we're going to have to do some work to this. But okay, let's go in now. We're going to create another layer mask. And let's go in and just get a lot of this out. There we go. And what you'll see is that it doesn't look like this makeup is really on the skin. And we're gonna do something so it actually looks like it's on the skin. You want to make sure that there's, you don't have makeup on this little line right here. There should be a little kind of bump right here on the brow. So you want to make sure this stays out, and you don't want the makeup to go over into the eye. Now we're going to do something so that the this color will combine with the skin. We're going to go to this thing called Blend If. And what I'm going to do is this basically is a kind of a blending layer trick, so that if you have two layers, this is the layer on the top and this is the layer on the bottom. And what you want to do is decide if the layer on the bottom, you want to allow parts of the layer on the bottom to show through. And so here's the layer on the bottom and here's the layer on the top. And I want for the light and the dark parts of the layers below it to show through. So here's the dark parts. If I want the dark parts to show through it, I would lift this up, and as you can see, all the dark parts are now starting to come through the image that's above it. You see that? But it's kind of doing it in a very unpretty way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Alt, and I'm going to drag this, and now you can see it's separating. So it's going to allow all of the dark parts to be visible now. There we go. So I'm just going to do that a little bit. That's not really working. Oh yeah, okay, that's the problem. We need to click Alt, make sure that there's a separation so it'll be more smooth. Okay, there we go. And I don't want this part to come out, so I'm just going to put it so that just a little bit of the eyes are coming out. And at the top, I'm going to bring this side down so that some of the highlights in the skin will override the blue. So you can see that it's looking like a little bit more like it's actually kind of part of the skin here. Okay? You see that? Does that make sense? Okay. So the next thing we're going to do, and we're going to go back and adjust all this, but I just want to get all of this kind of onto the image. One of the things that's important to do with the mascara here is to make sure that this line is clear. So let's go with the alpha channel and make sure that this layer right here and this guy, I think like right here. Okay, so that's kind of more or less good. Still looks a little fake. Need to make sure we definitely get it out of the eye there. So I'm going to bring up the hardness and just make sure that none of this is going into the eye. There we go. That looks better. Okay. Now I'm still not very happy with that, so I'm going to bring down the opacity a little bit. There we go. It's fading a little bit better. Not perfect. And now the reason why I said you don't really have to change any of the color is you can always change that by hitting Control U and bringing up the hue and saturation panel. And so I can just drag this and make these colors change to whatever I want them to be. So there we go. Let's just put that like that right now. You can change the saturation, or you can bring the saturation down so it looks more subtle. I think, subtle is always the best way to go with all these. You can change the darkness. You just want to make sure it looks kind of natural. So that's looking more natural. I don't really like that. Okay, that looks a little better, I think. I'm really not a fan of, wearing a lot of makeup. So there we go. Okay, So the next thing that I'm going to do for the sake of time is I'm going to dodge and burn, dodge and burn a little bit, dodge and burn a little bit. So what I'm going to do with this new layer is I'm going to hit Shift, Backspace, and it's going to give me, and then hit Enter, and I'm going to have a 50% gray image. So what I'm going to do is go over it and click Overlay, like that. I'm going to hit Control minus, just to bring me back a little bit. And I'm going to go up to this side and I'm going to do the burn tool. Now the burn tool is going to do basically what people try to do in terms of contouring. So if you want to see what it does, you can look up here. I've got the range, which is it's only going to affect shadows, and it's got my exposure is 35%. I'm going to take that down just a little bit to about 20. And now I'm going to start just drawing on this layer. So I've got it pretty low, but you can see I'm just going to do it way too much. Just going to keep going over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And you can see that that's just way too much. Okay, so I'm just going to go back. I'm going to hit Control Z, Control Alt Z actually. And I'm going to go over here. Now in general, what you want to do is you want to put some shadows right here. You want to burn here, and then you want to dodge where you see all the highlights. And burning and dodging is a really kind of, it's been talked about over and over in terms of retouching, but it really does help you bring out all of the makeup. So I'm just going to burn right here until it feels right. And the burning is going to make that makeup really stand out. And you want to kind of like burn all this in here and then a little bit here. There we go. But you want to stop burning when it starts looking like you're doing too much. I'm going to burn here a little bit. And yeah, we've already overdone it. It's starting to look a little over burned. Now what I would typically do if there wasn't a light here, she's got a really strong backlight here, rim light. And so what I would typically do is I would burn right here, but it's not going to do anything really burning right here because it's only going to burn shadows. So I'll burn around, I'll give her a little bit of shape in her head. I'll come and maybe, burn down her ears a little bit, burn her neck. You don't want to do too much. But I'm just kind of darkening these areas. And since we're not working on the other side, we're not going to do much there. And you can go in and see. Yeah, we burned a little too much there. I'm just going to bring that down with the opacity. You can also create an alpha channel on this one or a layer mask on that one, and just put the flow at 10 and just kind of like paint that out a little bit. Let's see. Oh, you got to paint it out with the actual brush, not the burn tool. So there you go. Wow, that's too much. Okay, 5 on flow. There we go. It's a little better. Okay. We're getting there. We're getting there. All right. And you just have to go back and adjust this stuff. If you look at this, it looks a little bizarre. So I'm going to change her eye again. Change that color a little bit to like a green, I guess. Okay. Now let's put a little bit of blush. I just watched a video where somebody was putting on blush, and it was like they basically just got the blush, and you kind of want to let's pick her skin and then just bring it over here. That's one of the benefits of using Photoshop is you can actually pick the tone of her skin and then go over to this side and boost the saturation. So I'm just going to draw this over here. That's probably not the best color. We're going to have to change that. So I'm going to go Filter, Gaussian Blur. Need a little more blur. There we go. A little bit of blur. It's way too orange and way too saturated. So let's bring down the saturation. Let's move this around a little bit. There we go. That's a little better, don't you think? Okay. I'm going to bring down the opacity a little more on that, just so it's barely showing. We can move it around. There we go. That's a little better, I think. Okay, and we're going to block that out with the alpha channel. There we go. Now when you zoom in on this guy, it's actually working because it's not a very high. You can see all the texture and everything. But if we you know, boost it up a little bit, it's going to start looking like something sitting on top of it. So again, I'm going to double click on that and make sure that the light parts of the skin can go through. So I'm going to hit Alt and bring this down. And so you see that? The light parts from underneath now can come out. And it just looks a lot more realistic that way. Okay, this, I mean, I'm sorry guys, I hate these colors. Let me just try to desaturate that a little bit and move that into, there we go. Every time I do this, and these eyes can use, more work. We could sit here and work on these eyes for a while, but we really don't, I think you guys kind of get the idea behind that, so I don't want to spend too long doing it, but suffice it to say, I'm not totally happy with that. Okay, now let's work on smoothing the skin. Now this is something I love to do. I'm going to take these three, I'm going to hit Control click these three, which is all of the face and the skin, and I'm going to group them together, and then I'm going to hit Control E. So they're all together in that layer. And now I have the original one here, so here's the new one. I'm going to duplicate this one again, and I'm going to go up to Filter, and I'm going to blur this again, Gaussian blur. Not that much, and I want to just make sure I've got all the kind of tones. But this is going to be our, kind of our, what's the word? The makeup. Well, anyway, I think you know what I mean. It's the cream that you put, the base or whatever you put on your face to just make everything look smooth and not to see the pores and everything. So, obviously when you see a lot of people doing these tutorials, you'll see them basically start just cutting holes out. And this is like, the worst thing you can do in Photoshop is just to start cutting out the eyes and cutting out the nose and stuff, and then trying to leave these parts basically blurred out so they look like this. And let me show you a way to do this that's going to work a lot better, okay? I'm going to delete that layer mask. Okay, now in order to create a black layer mask, you just hit Alt and then click on the layer mask. And so now this is completely black. And so instead of trying to paint out the stuff that we don't want, I'm just going to very subtly paint in the things that we want. But we're going to run into a problem, and I'm going to show you what happens, okay? So this is our blurred layer right here. I'm going to start painting in. This is at 5. I'm going to put that up to 30. And so I'm going to zoom in, and you're going to see. I'm going to start painting in. Even at just 30, this is still way too much, okay? So let's put this down to let's just do 10. And go back in time. Just going to paint all this black. Okay, so let's start painting with white at 10 flow into this image. There we go. You can see it's just starting to kind of smooth that out. Have to be very careful with this way of working because it can look very fake very fast. I'm going to make this bigger. And this already looks pretty fake. So I'm going to bring it down to about 50%. So there we go. And one of the key things you can do with Photoshop is always just bring down the opacity and things will look much better. It won't look so fake. I see a lot of people teaching Photoshop and not really, showing something that doesn't look edited. It's very easy to create something that looks perfect, but it's very hard to create something that doesn't look like it's been Photoshopped. And that's why there's so much controversy about Photoshop now, because all these guys go out there and they make everybody look perfect, and it's just not reality. Okay, there we go. Now look at her face. You can see all of the pores and everything are still there. but we're smoothing it out. Now I'm gonna, I want to show you how you can get around this so that you can really just smooth, her face still doesn't look that smooth. So I'm gonna take this other image that we made and I'm gonna put it up above the image with the smoothing of the face. And I'm going to go up to Filter, Other, High Pass. And what High Pass does is it's basically going to put all that texture into the image so we can see all these little details. So, okay, let me go and then you're going to overlay that. You can overlay or you can do hard light or you can do whatever. And so now we've still got all the detail of that skin in there. So we can bring it down or bring it up or whatever. And now when we paint with this one, we don't have to worry so much about blurring it. So we can just blur the heck out of this guy. We can, bring it up. And we can start doing what we were doing before. But you don't have to worry so much about losing the detail in the skin because that detail is on that one layer. You can still go too far doing this. I mean, you can go too far doing anything, but it's going to allow you to do a lot more. Okay, so we're getting there. That red really doesn't work very well. Let's, change that. Change the color. That's a little better. Desaturate. Okay. It's a little better. Okay, so we're looking good. Now, what are we going to do to, her eyelashes already look pretty good like that, but there's a really good way to really bring out her eyelashes. And I'm going to copy this. Oh, no, not that guy. Copy this guy. Put this at the top. And this is our original image. I, unfortunately didn't make a copy of the other one. So I'm just going to make this into a black and white image. So I'm going to go to Control-Shift-U and hit Control-L. And I'm going to try to isolate the black and the white in this whole area. So we can just use that for my little thing that I want to do here. So I'm going to bring down the whites until we just have these eyes here. Bring it down. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, we can use that. Okay. So now I'm going to hit multiply on this layer so it's all just the dark. And again, I'm going to hit Alt and then a layer mask. And then I'm going to go here. And this model really doesn't have that much of a problem with the darkness of her eyebrows and her eyebrows and eyelashes. But what you can do if you're in a situation where they are not dark and you want to darken them, instead of trying to draw out a million little hairs, is you can just start painting in from this layer the darkness in there. Okay, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to start painting in here. And you can see that now we're darkening up her eyebrows and we're darkening up her eyelashes, because this is all black. If you look over here, you can see that it's not nearly as dark as it is over here. And if you go too far, of course, you can bring it down. Let's just see how it looks. There you go, see? And it also helps us to darken up the eyes a little bit if we've got some little details there. Okay, looking good. All right, what's next? Some of you who took my other course might know this little trick. If you want to give her some eyelashes, what we can do is just use one of our brushes. I've downloaded one of our brushes, a brush from a website. All you have to do is do a search on Google for eyelash brushes. And I've brought them in here. Here's an eyelash brush, and you can see it's actually pretty cool. I'm going to hit right curly brackets to make this bigger. And this isn't for everybody. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm going to make sure this is black. And I'm going to put this over her eye. And that didn't work because this is not 100. Okay, let's try that again. All right. That looks pretty damn good. Sorry. Sorry for my language. Here we go. Okay. So let's bring this down. Make sure it's actually fitting in her eye. Okay. I'm going to hit Control T, and we can kind of play with it and see if it actually is in her eye. There we go. And it's not quite working with her other lashes, but I think it'll work. I know some other people that actually draw in eyelashes. And this one has some bottom eyelashes too, so let's go get those. Okay, there we go. Let's right curly brackets, put these on. There we go. All right, looking good. Okay. So I think we're pretty close. I mean, there's obviously a lot of things we can do. We can take, for example, the eye. We could also, really bring out the color in her eye. This is really not a tutorial on eye color and stuff, but if you want to just do a quick change of the eye, you can take her, take her eye there and really boost the saturation. Let's see. See if that's as easy as I'm making it. We don't want that to brush. Let's see. Okay, just take the saturation of the eye, that layer. There we are. Yeah, that looks totally natural, doesn't it? All right, and then we could paint that out a little bit. Just paint that. But this isn't what I would really call like doing makeup. And you can sharpen. See how that looks. Okay, just bring this down. Like everything, just bring it down until it looks, there you go, bring it up until it looks real. You can also paint, another thing I would do would be to paint into the eyes here, just some white, and then lower it down slowly. Just paint some white into the eyes. And then bring down the opacity, and then just kind of, take that out. There we go, there's our neighbors again. And, or you can just go through, go with the stamp tool and stuff, and or you can do dodge with that, whatever, just to bring up the whiteness a little bit. It's not perfect. All right, so I want to make sure I'm giving you guys stuff that you can use, and you can do the lips too if you want to put lipstick on. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. You can just, if you want to, with the hue saturation, you can just look at the lips and really just bring up the saturation. And once again, I'm going to hit I on the layer mask, and then I'm just going to paint white into the lips, like so. And there we have our lipstick. I hope that's clear. Basically, all I'm doing is raising up the, I have with a adjustment layer, I just clicked on that, clicked on hue saturation, which is right here, and it comes with its own layer mask. And I just inverted that, and then I started painting. I raised up the saturation on her lips, the normal saturation. I didn't put any colors or anything. And then just painted her lips in there. And let's just paint the whole thing to see how that looks. There's other people who paint colors onto it and want to change the colors and stuff, but you can do the same thing here. Now the thing that you're going to run into is around here it starts looking a little fake. Okay, now the last thing that I'm going to do is, and I'm going to take that down a little bit so it looks more natural. See, okay, let's bring it up. We might even want to blur it just a tiny little bit. So let's blur that filter, blur, Gaussian blur. That's going to be too much, I fear. Okay, no, it's okay. It's good. Okay. Now I'm going to the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of dodging. So let's create a new layer. Again, we're going to do Shift Backspace and then Enter. And we're going to have an overlay here. So we're going to put gray. Whenever you have a gray layer and you do overlay, it disappears, because in an overlay it shows the light and the dark, but it doesn't show the 100% gray. Okay, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go to my dodge tool, and I'm going to say highlights. It's at 33. I'm going to do about 25, and I'm going to go into where all my highlights are. So you can see that it's going to slowly bring out my highlights. There we go. We don't need much here. And under the eye, you always want to make sure you bring out the area under the eye. And I'm going to go a little too far with this so you can just kind of see what's going on. One of the things that I didn't learn when I was first starting Photoshop was dodging and burning. And I kind of understood it, but I didn't totally understand it. And now that I've been using Photoshop for many, many years, it is really one of the most important parts of the retouching process, because you're really controlling the shape of the face. And I think most women know that, who have put makeup on, because they do contouring and stuff like that. But a lot of guys don't totally understand that until too late. Okay, so let's just do some of the details here in the eye. You can get really get in here and kind of make some of these little details shine. I love to make the eyes look kind of, moist. Put like a little shine in here. These little teeny details don't really, they don't totally show up that much. You can dodge a little bit up here. Just want to make sure you have that. And you're going to look at this and you're going to go, okay, I went way too far. And then you can create your layer mask and then go through and start with your brush. You can just go through with a flow of like 20. You can go through and start toning things down a little bit. So basically we're drawing, oops, I got to make that black. We just go through and start clicking on areas where it kind of looks fake. And all right, there we go. Well, I think that's enough. We're at 37 minutes right now, so I think you kind of get the point. There's a lot of stuff we could do. We could make the eyes look a lot darker. We could make them look more exaggerated. We can really kind of get into more details with this, but this, for the most part, is what I do whenever I need to add a little bit more makeup to a model. Sometimes, we've done photo shoots where the makeup guy couldn't make it, or the person couldn't afford a makeup artist to come in. So I would say, instead of doing a poor makeup job, let me just put some makeup on you after you finish. So anyway, I hope you've gotten a lot out of this, and I thank you guys. I appreciate all the people who have left great comments. I want to see your projects, so definitely put some in the section where you guys can show what you've done. I am so impressed with what my students have done. It just blows me away sometimes. Thanks again for all the support, and we'll see you in the next class.